Sweet. All right. Welcome into another episode of a Colorado Craft Podcast by Mile High Bourbon and Rye. My name is Zach. I am the host of the show, as always. And today I am very excited to be joined by Scott Moore of DALKITA. Am I saying that right?
That's right. Yes, DALKITA.
Awesome. DALKITA Architecture. You guys are a Colorado-based architecture firm, and I'm very excited to talk about this because when I was a kid, I definitely thought architecture was something I'd be interested in based on all the Legos and Lincoln Logs that I was constantly playing with. So yeah, as Colorado Craft Podcast, if this is your first time tuning in, is a show based specifically on crafting in Colorado, whether that be typically revolving around beer, wine, and spirits, but we'll talk photographers, we'll talk architects, we'll talk, anything that is craft in Colorado. And again, very excited to have Scott here. Before we jump in, I do want to give a quick shout out to Crazy Mountain Brewing in Denver. While we're not actually on site recording there this time, they're still awesome brewery. Been the place that has allowed me to host guests there in the past, and will continue to have episodes there. So I want to continue to give them the shout outs that they certainly deserve for giving me that space. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Scott, tell us a bit about the history of your company, how you became an architect.
Well, let's see. So I became an architect because when I was in high school, every other class bored me except drafting. And so I went to college and did a 6-year undergraduate master's program at the University of Illinois. I grew up in Chicago, or in the northern suburbs, and that's how I got to be an architect.
That's pretty awesome. I like that area a lot. My wife is from, I think it's more southern part of Chicago, but Midlothian area, if you're familiar with that at all.
I've heard the term Midlothian. I think that's kind of southwest a bit.
That sounds right.
Yeah. My folks, after I went to college, my folks moved to a place called Flossmoor, which is on the totally, the south end of the city.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I've been out there. I haven't been in Chicago too much, but visited a couple of times, and it's an awesome, really pretty area right on the lake too when you get out there. And the food's amazing.
Yeah, I really like Chicago. It's, you can live there without a car. I just get a kick out of riding the subways and the L's.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what brought you out to Colorado once you had your degree in architecture?
Well, I was looking at a long commute from the suburbs and didn't really find any prospects in Chicago. And so I like to ski. I learned to ski on a place called Wilmot Mountain, which is in the south side of Wisconsin. It was a garbage dump. And
okay.
We, in order to make it more challenging, because there was only a few runs and they were short, we learned to ski backwards and drink peppermint schnapps, which both of those would make it a little bit more challenging. And when I got to Colorado, it was a completely different world. Skiing in Colorado versus some little hill in the Midwest. And, I just fell in love with Colorado, and I've lived in Colorado more than any other place, even though I didn't grow up there and wasn't born there.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a beautiful state. I'm personally born and raised here, so, little biased, but absolutely love this state as well. I have not skied as much. I don't think I could go backwards with peppermint schnapps on a set of skis right now, but...
Well, you probably could if it was a nearly flat hill.
Well, that might help a little bit. Yeah, absolutely. Well, how did you end up starting DALKITA Architecture?
So I started a firm just with my name, and we were doing custom remodels and additions for homes. And one of my clients, a fellow named John Cottier, was just a wonderful man, and he had been in the printing business. he sold his business and retired and said, well, I've built a couple decks. I'd like to like tear down all but one room of my house and totally rebuild it. And I was his architect, and John was his own contractor for this. He had some experience, building things. And he started around the 4th of July, and they had Thanksgiving dinner there. And that's a pretty impressive schedule for a scope of project like that. And John's like, this is fun. I'd like to do this some more. I said, all right, hey, why don't we start a construction company to go with this architecture company? And we called that DALKITA. We couldn't think of a name for it. And so at the time I had a dog that was a Dalmatian Akita mix.
Oh.
So that's where the name came from. And we did a few projects together, and then John's kids moved away, and so he decided that he would rather, he and his wife Peggy picked up and moved to Tennessee. So that their thinking was it would be better to watch the grandkids grow up than than just see them on the holidays or whatnot. And so then at that time we combined, we went from two separate companies. We combined the architecture into DALKITA and continued doing a lot of high-end residential remodels in the Denver area.
Okay. Awesome. And then on your guys' About Us page, it looks like you teamed up with Matt, your partner in this, in 2014.
Yeah. Matt was hired in 2014. Before that, my wife, Colleen, came into the firm around 2012.
Okay.
And so by the time Matt was hired, we were pretty well getting specialized in distilleries.
Okay.
So awesome. My first distillery was Downslope Distilling. And
one of the oldest in Colorado.
Yes. And DALKITA was the architect and contractor. It had a shoestring budget. I made $8 an hour because I had to learn how all the code stuff. And we did a lot of the metal stud framing, installation of doors and things with the owners at that time, the founders of Downslope. And that was referred to me by my good friend and mentor, Jim Mitchell, who was a residential architect in Denver. And he actually lived in Greenwood Village at the time. And when I was, kind of getting my firm off the ground, I didn't have enough work. So I did some freelancing for Jim.
Okay.
And Jim was an avid home brewer. And so he would frequent the beer at home store in Inglewood. Do you know where that is or where it was?
Yeah, I actually am familiar with where that one was.
Yeah. And so that was owned by Andy Causey, who's the main founder of Downslope. Andy and Mitch. I forget Mitch's last name. Gosh darn it. And Andy's brother, Matt Causey. But Andy asked the only architect he knew, because he wanted to sell the beer at home store and start a distillery. So he asked his customer, Jim, and Jim said, well, I don't do commercial, but here's this guy. And so that's how I was introduced to Andy, and that was our first distillery. Then after that, we got put together with Stranahan's. I've been doing a lot of work in Denver and knew some folks with the fire department. And I had told a fellow named Brad Emmerich that worked for the fire department that I, was getting this distillery experience. And so at the time, Stranahan's was being purchased by Proximo, and they needed to, they had a new building, or they had bought that Heavenly Days brewery.
Yeah.
And what funny story about that, me and a friend, a neighbor, I lived in West Washington Park at the time. So I remember going and playing pool at the Heavenly Days brewery. And I also remember there was a junkyard next door. And after a few beers and a few rounds of pool, my friend's wife talked us into climbing the fence to rescue some kittens. in the junkyard, where then, I don't know, 10, 15 years later, I built a building on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that then kind of got us into Stranahan's, and we started doing classes at Downslope. A lot of distillers will give classes on distilling as a way to supplement income. And so Downslope was one of these. And I went to one of the classes because I figured I better learn how to distill if I'm going to be designing a distillery. It's like, if you can't be a painter if you don't know how to hold a paintbrush, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so I figured I better understand, what it is I'm designing. And so I took the class, which was very educational. And then we just talked with the group about codes and things and about the build. And that turned into, we began giving half a day of the 2-day class was then devoted to a presentation that Matt at first me, but then it was Matt and me and Colleen, and then one or the other. And we would just provide that. And that was very educational to people, helped a lot of people get started. Some of those people became customers. We started doing, attending ADI, American Distilling Institute. Then later, ACSA, American Craft Spirits Association. And we give classes and still do at those organizations. Didn't do ACSI this year, but we'll be at ADI. And so that is kind of our way of not only giving back, but it also helps us make connections.
Yeah.
We just love it when we'll do it all day, or we've even done 1 2-day seminar. And a lot of times architects will come to that. And nothing makes me more happy than to have someone be able to get what they need out of one of those classes to where they don't have to hire us. We're happy to be hired too, of course, but it's nice to give feedback that the content we're providing is helping others.
No, that's really awesome. So, I mean, obviously that class is really cool. What's something that, if you haven't taken the class, you're not learning these things that you guys have when you're designing a distillery? What's something that people probably wouldn't realize you've got to think about when you're designing these buildings?
I think the biggest thing is the process.
Okay.
You've got to think about marrying a building and a structure with a factory. And then most distilleries are kind of like, most micro distilleries that we work on are kind of like a brew pub in a way, where there's a retail and drinking establishment somehow associated with it, whether it's just a tasting room in some states where they give free cocktails, or whether it's a full-on bar where they serve, a bar or restaurant in some cases where they serve food. And so the biggest thing is, I think, is understanding, for me, is understanding the process, and then being able to learn that how and each one is a bit different. We have to learn about each client's process and then be able to explain it to the design team to help give them an understanding about what kind of mechanicals or electricals systems they're going to need to be putting in there, what, the structure that's needed. And then, so that's kind of our core function, is to take the factory process, which we as architects call the program, along with the public side of it, the tasting room side, and combine that with the technical needs to make that process work and work safely and be code compliant in a building.
Okay, awesome. There's a lot of stuff that I don't think people realize goes into that in the background, getting that all opened up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we were connected through Meridium Spirits, who you guys are doing their build out on their new location in Denver.
With the architect, we have another contractor called Single Track, which is, they're just fantastic.
Okay, awesome. But like looking at them, I know when I spoke to him, he's still kind of working with the fire suppression system that needs to be installed and everything before they can start building it out. But there's a lot that goes into, I'm sure, just overall, like you were saying, with the everything that you have to take into account. What do you think is the most challenging aspect of coming up with a design that's functional, but also then, is inviting, looks nice for the customers and for the distillery?
The most challenging aspect. I think probably budget.
That's fair.
Probably budget is the most challenging aspect, especially for the micro distilleries. And a lot of our clients, they're startup businesses, which is that's really cool because I get to meet these sort of out of the box thinkers that are they're sort of mavericks trying something new. And so oftentimes though, it's a chicken and egg thing, right? You don't have any, you can't spend a bunch of money before you make a bunch of money. And so that's probably the biggest challenge, is finding a way to get the operation what it needs out of the building while maintaining code compliance, to get into the black, to begin making or earning some income and maybe even support further expansion. So for Meridium, for instance, is a phased project.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and it's not their first location. They had another location, I believe, in Elizabeth.
Yeah, and they're moving from there.
Yeah, but the build out that is happening right now at their Denver location is kind of the minimum to maintain production, so that they can make the shift from the Elizabeth location, reestablish their production levels to feed their market that they have established already. And then we often take a look at, well, what will this look like if it expands? And so we did that with Meridium, and in the future we call it a master plan, which they say master plan with relationship to city planning, and it's antiquated as soon as it's done, but it gives you, it kind of, because we don't know what's going to transpire in the next year, 2, 3 years, with the distillery, with Meridian or any distillery at its location, but we can try to predict what the future is going to bring, based on the distillery's financial goals, their marketing goals, the type of product they want to make, and so forth. The space, we say, okay, well, in the future, we think we can have a tasting room to serve this many people, and we have to, before you could do that, we work. And this is coming usually from the owner, right? They'll be like, okay, we need to sell so many bottles. Yeah. And so then we can help them figure out, all right, you need a boiler this big for a still that will make so many bottles. And so, yeah, so that's where the budget can become, I think, probably the trickiest thing. And even with large companies that are well off, budget, there are few and far between, but sometimes there's these folks that just have an unlimited budget, right? And that can be as big of a challenge, if not a bigger challenge, than people who have a realistic budget, because it's like putting too many bells and whistles in a car, right?
Okay.
If like people will complain about a lot of cars today, they're safety. They have these nannies, right? You can't shift your own transmission,
Yeah.
and so you can put you can put too much into something and then have it kind of be gaudy, I guess would be a term for it,
Okay.
right? And so it's finding the balance. What is going to be enough and targeted in the right way to make people feel they're in a pleasant space. The idea oftentimes is that by visiting the distillery, the customer then takes ownership over that product. That's my Meridian vodka. I went and saw it made, right? That's what they tell their friends. And so you don't have to have like gold plated glassware and leather covered everything in order for somebody to have a good experience. You don't have to have, although it can be beautiful, like some of the older breweries, and New Belgium's first brewery. I went and toured there. It's just got beautiful tile work in the first row of it. And if you haven't gone to tour that, you should. It's just gorgeous. And that is nice. And I would, advocate for that. I wouldn't change a thing. But at the same time, that has a purpose, and that purpose is to put forward a sense of quality. Now, not everyone can put that investment up front. So can you polish concrete, for instance, and have it provide the same sense of quality and shine and cleanliness? Are there ways to achieve those goals, those aesthetic goals, without without spending exorbitant amounts of money?
Okay. Awesome. That's there's a lot that goes into then the thought process behind all of that. I mean, I know it's a crazy amount, but that's a couple of things I wouldn't have thought of. Like, I agree. I've been on the New Belgium tour, and that, I mean, it really is. It's an awesome tour, and the whole building's just really pretty up there in their original space. But I wouldn't have even considered, like, I gotta restrain the budget down to let's look at polished concrete and give it that same clean feel. But that makes a lot of sense. That's really neat.
Yeah. And so every project is different, and there's all these different factors that have to come into it, and all these different people, from the clients, and that the owners may be different than the people who are operating the tasting room, than the people who are operating the production. They all have needs that will make their jobs easier and make the product better and make the visitor experience better. And then you've got all these different specialty engineers. If you're building a new building, you're going to have a civil engineer, geotechnical engineer to understand what the soils are like. We'll have structural engineer, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, plumbing engineer, sometimes fire protection engineers designing the sprinklers and the fire alarm system. Sometimes we've had to be involved with the environmental engineers dealing with sites that have had industrial processes on them. We did a project recently, and we were surprised to find out that there was a methane map in North Denver of where there were some 100-year-old landfills that had never been mitigated properly. And there was a map the fire department had of places where methane was an issue and would seep into buildings and cause an explosion if it wasn't mitigated. And I had never heard of that. So
That's crazy.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, and with the volatileness of a distillery too, I mean, you definitely have to keep that in mind. Like,
Yeah.
I never even heard of that either.
Yeah. If you've got alcohol vapor, then you add in methane. I mean, I've not looked at the science behind that because luckily we found records and did tests that our property wasn't, it's like on the edge. It wasn't in the area where we had to, mitigate it. But yeah, there's just new things coming up every time.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's crazy. The methane map, that is definitely not something I would have ever even really thought of. That's nuts.
Me neither, well, not until a couple years ago.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right. Well, before we get to the next kind of couple of things to talk about, I do want to take a quick moment just to mention our unofficial official sponsor of the podcast, Kickin' Ass Mountain Pizza. Pizza company owned by my family up in Fairplay. They support us through, helping to advertise and stuff, and I do the same back for them. Wood-fired pizza oven, everything's made by hand to order on the spot right there. So, if there's a line of people, sometimes the pizza takes up to 20-ish minutes, the longest typically. But once it's actually made and put in that oven, it's like a minute to cook and be done. It's crazy. That thing's just so hot. All fresh ingredients, like I said, all handmade, phenomenal pizza place. So if you find yourself up in Fairplay by the Snitching Lady Distillery, they're located right out back. Still closed for right now, but looking to open up mid to late June, July timeframe. So, again, thank you, Kickin' Ass Mountain Pizza, for being the unofficial official sponsor, and looking forward to getting us some pizza back up there as soon as they're opened again.
Now I know where I'm going on my next trip to South Park.
Oh yeah, definitely stop in. Well, and, I mean, it's awesome too because they'll bring it in when they're open up. You can go into Snitching Lady, so go out back, order up your pizza. They've got a whole bunch to choose from. On the weekends, they have wings. They'll do meatball sandwiches sometimes. I mean, all sorts of good food, right? But then you can go in, you can have a dram, cocktail, whatever, of Snitching Ladies, and the pizza will be brought right into you at the bar or at one of the tables in there. So
nice.
You get some awesome spirits and delicious food. And I mean, heck, if you've been in South Park, Fairplay area, you can look anywhere and have beautiful views. So it's a good time for sure.
Yeah, I like it up there. That's synergy that you're describing.
Yeah.
And that's something that really, that's something that we look at when we're trying to help people decide where to put a distillery.
Oh, okay, cool.
So the synergy between the pizza
and the distillery
and Snitchin' Lady Distillery and Kickin' Ass Pizza, that helps them both, right?
Yeah.
Put a brewery on the street and maybe even a different kind of restaurant, and now you're getting even more, even more synergy.
Yeah, I think there's a couple more restaurants there, and I know South Park Brewing's actually moving out of South Park, down to Colorado Springs, but there are a couple more breweries or at least one more that just opened up in that area too. So, I mean, Fairplay is growing pretty quick. If you've been up recently and you grew up around it, we used to drive up there, or I had family in Buena Vista, and so I'd drive through Fairplay all the time, and it was just a small little one-stop light town, and now it's growing quick.
Yeah, last time I was there, I don't remember the name of the place. It's been several years, but my wife and I had a nice breakfast, sort of brunch, at a restaurant there, and there was it was different than it was 20, 30 years ago. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's growing every day. It's absolutely nuts. So, all right. Well, I mean, I've got a list up here, and folks, listening to the podcast or watching it on YouTube can check out at dalkita.com/project-list, or just look under our work and project list. You guys have been a part of a lot of distilleries, not even just in Colorado. So, what are a couple that stood out to you? What are a couple of distilleries you've helped build that really kind of stand out in your mind? Maybe even your favorites you've done.
Well, it's hard to pick a favorite, right? It's like
picking a favorite child.
yeah, well, yeah, it's like picking a favorite child, or it's kind of like saying, well, what's your favorite vodka or whiskey, right?
Yeah.
They're different. Okay, I've got a favorite vodka, maybe, well, maybe several, and then several favorite whiskeys. But if someone says, okay, here's here's a glass of Stranahan's, and here's a glass of Pappy Van Winkle, and here's a glass of Block bourbon, what's your favorite? They're completely different. So anyway, it's hard to have a favorite, but I think one that kind of stands out is the Block.
Okay.
The Block distillery is they've been our client for I don't know 5 to 7 years since they opened, and it says 2017 on our website. I swear they started before that. But, you talk about architecture and aesthetics. The building is just a concrete block building that was, and the words block are painted 2 stories high on the building. And there was an architect that made this his home studio, I think, and that had some tendencies in it. And they, the Block Distillery moved in there. They started small, and then they expanded it from 1/3 of the space into now I think they've got the whole building, and that sticks out because it's been a real success watching these 2 brothers and one of the brothers' wives own it, Craig and Cameron and Michelle. And why am I blanking on their last name? But it's up in, it's on, I wonder if it says on the website what road it's on. It's in the 5 Points area, Rhino Art District. But they just seem to do everything right.
Okay.
And it was a challenge. Again, we had budget because it's a startup. We had an existing space, and that's always a challenge, is, how to change something that was an architect's studio and residence into something that is a flammable liquids factory connected to a restaurant bar. And so they just seem to do everything right. Their marketing, as we got to sort of live vicariously through them, I suppose, and see how they are marketing, and their bottles are. I wonder if I got one up here. It's it's just they took what seemed to be this sort of nondescript building, concrete block building with the words block.
Yeah.
And they ran with that theme, right?
Yep.
And so that is that was just, that one sticks out a lot. And there's Stranahan's, of course, that one sticks out. I learned a lot there. I don't know, sometimes I felt like I was one of their crew because I was there so much. We did a lot of construction work there. Archetype is an interesting one. That's on Broadway. And before getting into distilleries, I would say 90% of my work as an architect from day one, when I was working for other firms, to today, was with remodels, and a lot of it adaptive reuse, historic preservation. And that was a movie theater that had become, fell into disrepair, and it had become like a X-rated movie theater. And and so one of the things about going into these old buildings is having to crawl around in the nooks and crannies to see how the damn thing's built.
Yeah.
This one had a fire and water entry, and it was the most disgusting thing I've ever been on. But then if you look at it today, it was constructed by Saunders. Saunders is a rather big construction company in Denver. And a lot of the larger construction firms will have these special projects divisions that will do smaller projects.
Gotcha.
And, they took this 100-year-old shell. I mean, I think the whole roof had to get taken apart, and all it was left was just the 4 walls.
So it was really gutted.
Yeah. I mean, gutted. I do believe that entire roof structure got replaced. If not the entire structure, at least everything but the main trusses. And it was just a thrill to work with Saunders because it was like a good higher level of construction professional. And then let's see what else sticks out. There's one. Well, 888. We did a barrel storage for 888. 888 is on Nantucket Island.
Okay.
And they have a spirit called the Notch, which is it's either a 10 or 12. They've got a 10 and a 12-year-old whiskey. I think it's a single malt, but it is. It sells for over $300 a bottle. Ooh. And it has won just about every award there is to win in this country and probably abroad. And the owners are just really cool people. And so they had an old barn, which was on Nantucket. And of course, Nantucket Island has got a lot of historic district overlays and a lot of controls about how to keep the character. And so we had to figure out materials that would be fire resistant and still compliant with the wood appearance of this thing.
Interesting. Okay.
We worked with a local architect, and most of our projects, we work with local architects. And in fact, if a client doesn't have one, we do encourage them to get, some local architects. And then we sort of fill in that 5% that it would take that, we've learned about distilleries over the past 15 years that it would take, architects first time like ours with downslope, they'd earn $8 an hour.
Yeah.
Still maybe not get it right. So, we can fill that in, but that was pretty neat. Just, to be sort of adjacent to that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Another cool one was Hanson of Sonoma. This is in Sonoma Valley, and it's in California. And they make some very good and rewarded vodka out of grapes. So
cool.
It's on the site of a winery, and
makes sense.
The winery is a separate business, and I believe Scott Hansen, the owner, he was a movie director. In his previous life. So when I went to his office in the distillery there, he'd have I saw these movie posters, and I'm like, "Oh wow, you like that movie too?" It's like, "Yeah, I directed that."
That's awesome.
And I think it's produced. I'm not sure on, but he was involved with it some make way. And so that was interesting to see is, talk about synergy, right? So I guess not every batch of wine comes out good, but what makes, have you ever, like, for instance, beer, right? Mm-hmm. Good beer is not going to make good whiskey. And if you taste what what if you taste so there's a couple of different in the single malt world, the grains say single malt is 100% barley.
Yep.
And the traditional manufacturing process includes separating the grains, the solids from the liquids, before distillation, and generally before fermentation. And so they call that wash, which is beer. Tastes terrible.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the traditional bourbon, of course, is made entirely different. It's got to be 51% corn. And it's generally fermented and distilled on the grain, meaning they don't separate the solids until after the distillation process. So I've never tasted mash, which is what they call, some single malt distillers will call mash the pre-fermented mixture of wort, essentially. And then, but the bourbon tradition just mashes before it's fermented, after it's fermented, just before it goes into the still. I've never tried that. I have to try it sometime. But Hanson's was really interesting. It was a beautiful trip out there. We, my wife and I and the dogs, we camped near a river near there, and we just basically swam down the river, and it was, it was just, it was like, like those water parks, a lazy river.
Yeah.
That's what this was like, only it was sandy and went through the woods and stuff.
Oh, that's really awesome.
Yeah. And while I was meeting with the fire department, Colleen went to the Charles Schultz Museum and got a picture of our Dalmatian Akita mixed dog, black and white, next to Snoopy and stuff. And so
Nice.
that's awesome. That's in Sonoma. And that was a challenge that we had trouble with a third party plan reviewer that just kept digging deeper and deeper and going off into tangents. And so finally went out there and had a very nice meeting with the actual fire marshal, and we got everything understood.
Nice. So were they using like the wine that failed to become good wine and then distilling that, or was it their own set of grapes?
I don't recall exactly, and probably wouldn't be able to tell you much detail about it, even if I could remember.
Yeah, that's fair.
But my impression was that the wine that they used to distill came from a variety of sources. So if there was some wine that wasn't necessarily suitable for, and I don't know that it all was being sourced from that winery that on the site. I think you'd have to ask them about
probably go there and talk to them. Yeah.
But I do know that, I do know that, you can, if you can make good vodka from just about anything.
Yeah. It'll ferment. You can make a vodka out of it for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And I guess that means I have an excuse now, or, my wife and I we're going to have to go to Sonoma just to check that out now. So
you're going to have to. And let me see if I can reach up here and show you a bottle of that. This, I think this habanero flavored vodka is one of their flagship best celebrated products.
That's really awesome.
Yeah. Well, neat people.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things to just touch on as we're kind of getting close to wrapping up here. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I appreciate you coming on. First, that's looks like a pretty awesome collection of bottles behind you there. Is there like, do you go after specific things, or most of these from projects you've worked on, or how's your collection built?
Well, I'd say about half of them are from projects we've worked on.
Awesome.
Oftentimes, someone will, sometimes our clients will give us a bottle as to say thank you. And whenever we go to visit their distilleries, of course, we purchase 1 or 2 bottles.
Yeah.
Other ones are from craft distillers that we have visited but haven't been our clients. And so we learn a lot by visiting other distilleries. So I think you've got one of the most noteworthy one is there's a Westland bottle up there.
Okay.
There's a peated whiskey from Westland. There's next to that is the Notch. I don't know.
Okay.
Which is the 888 product. And then some of them, there's a lot of Stranahans there. And for a while I was buying, trying to get a Snowflake.
Yeah.
And then there's some that are from the larger, like we've done the bourbon tour. And then we also spent a week on Islay. I never know how to pronounce it, if it's Islay or Islay.
Islay, I believe.
But so I've got, some distillery purchase only Lagwallen and Lefroy and some other things like that. And then there's some Wild Turkey and Jim Beam products up there, some Sazerac products, just things that we found to be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. And so another thing I just wanted to kind of quickly touch on is recently, as you said, some of the places you've worked on, they're winning all sorts of awards, like the one from Nantucket, but a couple of the Colorado ones too. And I think you were listed as one of or actually even the architect of record on like Old Elk, obviously Stranahan's, and the Block. All of them won some, brought home some hardware this year from World Spirits competition in San Francisco. The Block too. I mean, not only was that bottle really awesome, but they took a silver home for their Night Sweats bottled in bond straight bourbon.
Did they?
Yep. So,
that's I'm glad to hear that. I probably should have heard it before because I get notifications from them.
yeah.
Yeah, we did Old Elk's first location.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and there was a couple of guys that I don't believe are with them anymore that were the founders. I don't know if they've got they were, yeah. So we've done the first location for a couple of them, and
that's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, Old Elk, their wheated bourbon took home a double gold at that. And then Stranahan's, of course, I feel like they always end up winning some kind of gold or double gold. Their Diamond Peak took home double gold this year. So
Stranahan's is a unique product. I describe it as, well, it's a single malt, but it's kind of a cross. It's a single malt mash bill, but it's aged like bourbon.
Yeah, the new American barrels.
Yeah.
I really like their product a lot. I think American single malt being the description for it, I think that's a great term for it, because it brings that like traditional, what you'd find in Scotch style distillery, but it has enough of an American style whiskey twist to it that it stands out really on its own. And that style's growing a lot too. A lot of distilleries in the US are doing the same thing now.
Yeah. Yeah, I was surprised to find I was in Upper Michigan, not the Upper Peninsula, but the northern part of the Lower Peninsula, and in the grocery store was Old Elk.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, right next to my client's product. And
that's really awesome, actually. Yeah. It's cool to see Colorado's the footprint that Colorado distilleries are making just on the national and international scene is growing exponentially, it feels like.
Yeah, I think Colorado, some of the top states are California, New York, Colorado, Washington. I think maybe Oregon for some of the top craft producing states.
Yeah.
Colorado is definitely one of the pioneers, and a lot of that is due to the the speed with which they were able to change laws to facilitate, especially the tasting room component of microdistilleries.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been, I mean, being able to go to the distillery, check them out and everything is definitely a huge benefit for a lot of these guys for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what it's about. It's about authenticity.
Yeah, I would agree with that because, I mean, everybody that you talk to, at least that I've talked to so far in the industry, all the distillers, everybody, you can tell that they love the conversations with people. They're definitely wanting to share their knowledge and everything. I mean, so Downslope, for instance, like we touched on, having that distilling class, I think is an awesome thing to do because it's that, they're really sharing what they are, being, like you said, it's a lot of that authenticity, but also just that kind of willingness. It creates a real community with the industry here.
Yeah. Mitch Abate is the fellow that's still there. Downslope.
Gotcha. All right.
Good.
Awesome. And then, so one last thing that I wanted to just kind of point out for you on your guys' website, because I thought this was just one of the coolest things. On your About page, you've obviously got information about both of you guys, but your support staff, I think, is one of the coolest little spots on there.
Yeah, they're critical.
If I can here, I'm going to try to just share this piece of the screen here. So the About and share the screen. All right, so there we go. If you can, we should be able to see that on there. So we've got Jax, Vern, Junior, and Pickles are your security, HR, floor supervisor, and hydration engineer. I thought I saw that on your page, and I was like, this seems like a really awesome thing to add on there. So,
yeah, we think it's kind of fun, and that's one thing I like about running a small business is Jax and Vern are my and Colleen's dogs, and then Junior and Pickles are Matt's. And Pickles is a hydration engineer because she would drink too much water. We have to stop her.
That's awesome.
But yeah, they make they make work a little bit more life-like, I guess. And so we like our dogs.
Yeah. No, I just really thought that was a really awesome just kind of piece there. I mean, we don't have a dog right now. We just haven't had the chance really to get one that we've got. Plus, my wife really likes cats, so we ended up with a couple of cats, and hard to get a puppy when you've got cats, at least right away. When they get a little older, we can, but same thing. I mean,
yeah, I love cats, but I'm allergic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I was, and for whatever reason, I seem to have mostly gotten over it. I don't know. Sometimes in the spring, I don't know if it's just the cat shedding or just all the traditional seasonal allergies, but sometimes that kicks my butt. But yeah, I love that you guys have that because my cat will come up sometimes when I'm doing a review. I'm trying to get pictures of stuff. He'll just step right in front. I'm actually surprised he hasn't jumped up on anything here. He's been wandering around. If you've seen me kind of looking down, it's because he's been begging for a little bit of attention, but so I thought that was awesome. I love the inclusion of the dogs in your guys' About Us. So awesome. Well, Scott, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I really, really appreciate it. It's been awesome talking to you. This is a ton of information I'm very happy to learn about. Hopefully we'll get to talk to you a bit more, maybe share a dram at one of the distilleries someday.
Yeah, sounds good, Zach. I'll probably be in Denver sometime this summer, so I'll look you up.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds great. Is there anywhere that you guys need to, would you like to put out? I'm obviously DALKITA.com to find out about you guys. Is there anywhere else people can check out or learn more about you?
I'm going to be speaking at the National Fire Protection Association convention in June. That's in Orlando. And then Matt and I will be at the ADI, American Distilling Institute convention in Baltimore towards the end of August this year. So those will, if you can go to either of those conventions, sign up for our classes, and hopefully we'll meet you there.
Sweet. Yeah. So I'll definitely look into it. I don't know if I'll be able to, but I'd love to go out to the ADI one in Baltimore. I think that would be a blast.
Yeah. Baltimore's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Interesting place.
Yeah, that's fair. So yeah, well, thank you again. As we kind of wrap up here, thank you to everybody who tunes in for another episode of Colorado Craft Podcast. If you'd like to support the show, support the website, best way, interactions, check us out, share us with people, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, all the social medias. You can find us at Mile High Bourbon. Also check out the new YouTube channel where this will obviously be. All the audio-only podcasts are on Spotify, Apple, Good Pods, and really wherever else you can listen. Sharing the podcast, like I said, is a huge help. Leave us reviews, leave comments, ratings. All of that helps us out a ton. For direct support, if you want to go to milehighbourbon.com/shop, you can purchase glassware. You can purchase. We've got the Silver Heel smoked salt that I make as well, and is used on the pizzas at Kickin' Ass Mountain Pizza, but also available for purchase to use on your foods. I personally think it's really great. And then, of course, any revenue that we bring in from the site, part of the proceeds always go to local Colorado charities. Kind of a big thing. Something very important to me is to make sure we're always giving back. So thank you, of course, as always, to Roma Ransom for the intro and outro music that we've got. And yeah, Scott, it was a pleasure talking to you. And like I said, looking forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, nice talking to you too, Zach. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.